Hi, so I'm going to be talking about the inner child, and the inner child is its own thing. I talk about the 7 minds and the 7 major chakras that correspond with those minds. I encourage you to watch those videos. But I am going to be tweaking some of the things I talked about in this video when it comes to the inner child, because this is like an aspect of you that it doesn't have to have that much importance if you have found a way to evolve past it. But sometimes we have this inner child aspect that still comes out, and it is still a major part of our lives, except it's just not an aspect of you that can be fulfilled. So I don't pay too much attention to it, but in this video I'll do one video for the inner child. Many people talk about the inner child in different ways, and I know a lot of people have many ways of interpreting what the inner child is. And this is like the aspect of you that's like your soft spot, the things that you grew up believing, or the things that you wanted to do, or the things that you wanted to do like even when you were younger, and you had that very moldable, fragile mind of yours, and you grew up with this aspiration to become something, or you wanted to make something out of some things. And it's like an aspect of you where you express a lot of your creativity, only really creativity with things that you're aware of. It's not the same as being creative with the creator mind. It's more of like a childlike aspect. Well, at least it comes off childlike when we actually think about it in like a 3D aspect. But when it comes to the inner child, this is like the first thing you're usually aware of. Like, it's like one of your first awarenesses. You're usually you're maneuvering through your life like mentally with your inner child up until a certain point, and then you start really incorporating that ego mind more and more and more. But for the most part, you're using that inner child for like things that you dream and aspire to be and do, and the things that kind of stir up that inner child within you. That's that inner child. Like, that's the aspect, and that side of you where you want to just wrap blankets around you and feel all warm and fuzzy and safe. That's that inner child aspect I'm going to be covering. So when it comes to that aspect, it's not really you, but it is an aspect that we tend to want to fulfill. In my last videos, I did say that it's an aspect that you really can't fulfill because it's a reflection, but I'm actually realizing that this isn't really a reflection of the ego. It's like a reflection of just of the heart, which is like an emotional aspect, which makes more sense to me because the inner child's an emotional aspect too. So it makes more sense to me that this reflection would actually be a reflection of an emotional aspect rather than another half of a mental aspect. So if you hear me in my last video say that the inner child's a reflection of the ego, in a sense, but also it's not necessarily a reflection of the ego. But we tend to jumble between the inner child and the ego mind because these two aspects are more apparent to us. Like, we have this first awareness, which is that inner child, where you have all these aspirations and dreams to be certain things, or to like make something out of the life that you have here. But then you have the ego, the mental aspect that actually goes about doing that. You know, the inner child just has that feeling. It goes based off of feeling. But then when you have the ego is all about just like doing and gathering those resources and being that, and wanting to be its own individual self to carry out that aspiration, you know. So when it comes to the inner child, there's usually when it comes to the inner child, you'll find that the other mind states kind of, well, at least the first 3 mind states, or the first 4 mind states, starting from the conscious mind, the inner conscious mind, the ego mind and the subconscious mind usually are correlated with this inner child, and the inner child becomes less and less relevant when you start getting to the throat chakra, the third eye chakra, and the crown chakra. So when you're working with this inner child, it's usually because you're trying to work on the lower chakras. It's not really something that you have to worry about when you're at the higher chakras. So the inner child, because it's just a reflection of like those lower chakras, or what's going on with you subconsciously, in the subconscious mind, a lot of people think that they have to do something with this inner child, like they have to heal it. And although sometimes it does feel good to like have that inner child feeling and do things that make that inner child aspect of you feel better, it's also just a reflection, so it can't really be fulfilled. The only way you can fulfill yourself is to follow back to your the heart chakra, which is your subconscious mind, or things that you subconsciously feel, or where you're at, but you're not really consciously as aware of where you're at on that level as you would be, doing mundane things or just picking up random other thought forms. You're not as conscious of things happening subconsciously as you are of the things that are right in front of you. So with the inner child is an aspect of you that was the first awareness. So this is like the you, not really like you, but it is like an aspect. It's like a mind state that you can tap into. I like to think of the inner child, like if someone's really acting in their inner child, you can think of like a Karen, or like the Victoria's Secret Karen, if you haven't seen that. So she's on the floor, right, and she's like crying, and she has like, she has no sense of like, she has no adult working with her at that moment. She's just being that crippling inner child that just has no hope. That wounded aspect, or that soft spot, she was literally embodying that, right? That's where her mind state was at. She was placing her mind state in that inner child. So that's why it's not really important for you to really use this aspect. So I don't reinforce the importance of the inner child. It is something that you can look back on, and it sometimes when you have like your ego overly developed, it will look back on that inner child, and it'll want to act like Karen, or that Victoria's Secret Karen, and it'll start to feel like, why couldn't I ever have this? Life's unfair. I'm going to do whatever I can now, using that ego. I'm going to do whatever I can now to make sure that doesn't happen to me. And that's usually all this inner child does for you. It bounces back that information. It lets you see the reflection of what is going on with you, or what's happening in your awareness, so then you can use the 7 major chakras to act on those things, to really use those mind states to act on it. So all in all, the inner child is just a reflection of like where your mind is, like what you're actually like paying attention to, like what is influencing your actions, like what's influencing you, what is going to drive you to do something. And it's usually motivated by like things that are either on that low level scale of consciousness, like the things that look shiny and glitters, and you just want to have it and take it home with you because it looks good, even though it won't probably serve you. You still want it because it shines and it sparkles, right? Or the things that make you look good in front of other people. The inner child loves to be appreciated, not really just even appreciated, just attention. It can live off of that attention, and that's something that people have with the overdeveloped ego. They usually like that stuff, but it's only because they're looking back at that inner child aspect of either not having it or needing to have it because it's had it before and it needs it now. Or maybe you've had certain things that you were conditioned with growing up, and the inner child reminds you of that, and you're going to use the self to get those things now. or maybe you had a lack of things, so now the self is going to try to use all the other mind states to get that thing. So what I'm trying to say is that the inner child, it's an aspect that can be a mind state, but I don't recommend it because you'll end up like Victoria's Secret Karen. But it is an aspect that can help when it's reflecting that image back on the ego. When the ego is trying to find that happiness, it'll probably try to look at the inner child like, oh well, I grew up without money, so I'm going to make sure I make lots of money now. And that can serve you in some way, only for so long though, because when you're bouncing back and forth between those mind states, those lower minds, it'll only serve you for so long before those things are temporary and they don't really fulfill you, because that reflection can't be fulfilled. The only way you can fulfill yourself is by paying less attention to that inner child. Sorry, inner child, can't always pay attention to you, but you have to stop looking at that inner child reflection and start looking at just the self and what's going on in your heart, not being concerned about having that attention you never got or how others see you, but instead just thinking like, well, am I happy with myself? Do I notice myself? Do I acknowledge my own efforts? Do I validate myself? And then that will make it so then you don't have to keep looking at that reflection of that inner child that can't be fulfilled ever. So I'm gonna leave it at that because there's not really much to talk about when it comes to the inner child. It's just a reflection of that heart space. It's a reflection of the things that awareness that you had at first, but it's not going to keep serving you moving forward. So if you like this video, you can hit that thumbs up button, but I'll see you in the next one.